Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for another StarCraft 2 cast. This time it's not just Korea versus Korea, we actually have a replay from the Wardy TV Summer Championship 2019, I guess if I'm going to say the whole entire title. This is from the losers bracket. If you would like to go and watch the entire tournament, had a lot of awesome names from all different regions, and you got to go to Wardy TV's Twitch channel, see it there. He also has a YouTube channel. Highly recommend to check him out for all the live matches for certain. But that's if you want to see the rest of the tournament. If you want to see this best of 5, then just stay right here and listen to the smooth sound of my voice. I don't actually think it's that smooth, but I've been told it's alright. In the top left, starting off on Thunderbird, it is the blue Terran, Clem. In the bottom right, as the red Terran, he is Fantasy. Yes, it's a TVT, but I thought it'd be interesting to see the mirror matchup, especially when it comes to the, I don't know, the legendary Korean Terran, right? That's just a phrase that goes together, versus the foreigner Terrans, the non-Korean Terrans, since their styles definitely are different. I would say that for a while, North America was just primarily copying Korea, so it was just, you know, Korea B. And then Europe has always had its unique style. Things have certainly changed. Things have, you know, been moved around. We've had more opportunity and then less opportunity and then more opportunity, so on and so forth, to actually try and homogenize, I suppose, the styles. But Europe has always kind of been, because it's in its own region, right? You can't really play to Europe, no one really wants to anyways. It's always had its unique style. So even if the Korean Terrans are leading the charge on what the meta is and what perfect Terran play is, that doesn't actually mean that the foreigner Terrans are necessarily following, but it usually does. So we usually get to see, you know, what just the mechanical differences are, and then maybe occasionally see some of the, like, oh, okay, so the Koreans are going 3 Raven and the, you know, foreigners are not type thing. So that's why I wanted to watch it. Second, we also have Fantasy, an awesome fan favorite. He has his own unique style sometimes. It also has him bringing it on the normal macro fronts in his last couple of potentially years. I don't want to say last year of StarCraft 2, but he has mentioned wanting to go out with a bang, you know, hopefully win a GSL. It's a lot to ask for before he probably goes back to Brood War and starts streaming that. So it's a great player to watch, and he certainly his ups recently, so I'm excited to watch him here. And then we have Clem, who was kind of along the same trajectory 2 years ago as Raynor, but then obviously Raynor kind of just skyrocketed forward. But Clem is a very promising, still quite young French Terran who has certainly had his share of oh shit, oh damn moments. Not quite making it to the upper rounds of WCS, but certainly participating in a lot of the online tournaments, such as what Wardy TV, Base Trade TV, Alpha X, all of them actually put on. So we'll see what he can do here. That has taken up the appropriate amount of time. Start talking about those build orders. Fantasy going for a fast 3rd CC. Off the back, just a factory and a barrack. So that is 3rd CC after factory. Not a very common build in TVT. We do see some hasty 3rd CCs, I'll say, even in the Korean TVT, where it can be a bit more action-packed sometimes. But it happens, and you kind of just revolve around each other, around getting your 3rds, but you both do get your 3rd. But this is especially fast. So a lot of TVT, that early game, does revolve around technology. That's why we don't have a lot of, you know, 3 racks. It's never really been a thing in TVT. Not even the 2-1-1 really is a thing. If you're Masters and below, go ahead and learn that build, it'll be fine. But when it comes to the pro stuff, no, it's usually up to that starport eventually. I guess someone's gonna call it the technicality of a 2 racks, you know, Proxy Reaper, but whatever, dude. So this is really unorthodox. This is going to be a surprise for Clem to see a 3rd CC already on the way, and in fact, already finished, turning into an orbital. He is trying to go for some harassment here. It could be game-ending if it wasn't scouted, and it was not scouted. Cyclone locks onto the medevac and takes away the option to micro these Hellions further, but still 4 Hellions get into that main base, and that is exactly what Clem wanted. But the SCVs were quick to be pulled. The Marines kind of stopped the Hellions here on the main high ground, and that is only going to be 4 SCVs dead. Not what Clem was looking for, especially because he scouted that his opponent was just going to go for a 3rd CC, not even do any of his own attack, has really not put a lot of minerals and gas into production, it is still going to get away with that fast third CC. Now, Clem totally called for, not just in this situation, but on this map, to go for his own third CC on location. Definitely a good thing to do on Thunderbird, but especially if you see what he saw. You're going to be a little bit curious as well if your opponent's going for some turtleneck or not. Fantasy capable of doing that, totally. But he saw that there was barracks on the way, so he's got a pretty clear vision of what he's up against, and it is up to him to try and make something work from being in this position, because with the inclusion of the starport, he's really pushed off his third CC. He's also pushed off his upgrades and pushed off his additional production. I mean, look what Fantasy already has compared to what Clem has, just now building his barracks. Your Fantasy already has his stim, has double engineering bays, and is working on those Marines. Now, Clem should have at least one very important advantage, and that is going to be a Raven. So he didn't go for 2. I don't know if that was because he scouted what he did. I didn't see the exact time he transferred off, or he only wanted to run Raven anyways, but that is an advantage. Ravens are very, very powerful. It's just that because Fantasy was able to push himself to the Marine production more than that slow but powerful 1-1-1 production, Ravens, they're not as cool. You know, if it's just one factory producing one tank at a time, 2 interference matrix, that's a humongous deal. If it's 3 barracks pumping 5 Marines at a time, so that, you know, there suddenly is 20 to 30, 40, a Raven anti-air missile is something you just run away from. You know, it's not nearly as game-changing. So I still want to say that's an advantage. It's not as good as what Fantasy has done here. Now he's going for the double drop, which is, I mean, it's up to him to do this. He has the position to be aggressive and to be mobile with how many Marines he's been able to produce and his supercharged economy. He also has taken the map with his Marines. We've got both Salnaga's taken. Certainly in TVT, we can have some medevacs actually shift queued totally around the map. So it is useful to take those. And then, probably more importantly, we have some Marines dotting the common attack paths. So beautiful play here from Fantasy, really taking control of the build order and then taking control of the mid-game, because Clem's not really the one capable of doing it. He knows that his stim was going to be later, he knows his Marine production was going to be later, and if your Marines are low in number, they gotta be home protecting the tank, they can't be off gallivanting. It's a risk to do so. One he might have been able to take, but then imagine if Fantasy's 2 medevacs spotted these tanks all alone. That's a bit of a problem. So Clem's in the defensive. We're going to have a fast 4th CC from him. Makes sense, but also a fast 4th CC from Fantasy, because that's just kind of where we're going. A lot of the time in TVT, you get that 3rd CC, no one really has a strong tank push in mind. You're going to go immediately into the 4th, and perhaps even quickly into what we would consider late game TVT with the additional starports. Now, 2nd factory is on the way for Fantasy. I haven't seen one yet for Clem, because I missed it, that's why. He already is done. He's going to have a slight lead in the tank production, but it's not so much it's not a lead as in, well, that's the better thing to do. You can work either with more Marines, tanks, or more tanks to Marines, that ratio, and you can make it work. I'd say on Thunderbird, which is a very defensive macro-based map, it might be better initially to have those tanks. As you spread around, as you get 4th, 5th, 6th, and sometimes those more Marines look better. But obviously you both want to be on 2nd factories. That's just the way you do things in TVT, bio versus bio. Always get a 2nd factory. I'd say it's a bit more of a question of if you get a 3rd factory or if you go into the starports. I gotta imagine both of them are going to go into the starports. We already have some Viking production started up again for Fantasy. Well, actually for him it's the first couple, because again he didn't go into that starport early on. And then even a Liberator here for Clem. I think that'll turn into Viking production soon enough. They both reach towards their 4th base, and so far, pretty passive TVT. Clem kind of forced into being the passive player because he had not been able to do anything that would actually punish what Fantasy was doing. He chose a harassment-based build that, if they're both on similar economies, got any damage done, then okay, good on, keep going. But if it doesn't do a lot of damage and your opponent has an economic lead, and you don't have an army lead either, you didn't really have an army lead, then what are you going to do? Now, Fantasy had the control of the map, uses that control to actually push forward, gain some position, but then go ahead and retreat, because you're not going to break that many tanks, and the Viking control is currently in Clem's favor as he starts to produce his Vikings yet again with that Raven. Can take out 4 Vikings clean from the fight. We'll go for an anti-armor missile. Either one would be very helpful as we get into that transition. As I was talking about, it's only 10 minutes, but we're kind of into that late game. A Raven can be very, very helpful, but also hard to control. So you're gonna have to keep a keen eye on where he uses that, if he can use it. Clem, definitely known, kind of the stereotype of like the young guys. They can have a lot of energy to multitask. That seems to be kind of a trademark of a lot of the up-and-coming players, is that they're multitasking. Their APM is just, it skyrockets. He certainly has the control, but sometimes it's almost like he's gone Super Saiyan without actually training, you know what I mean? Like, he has the APM, but it's all over the place, and he actually starts to miscontrol every now and again. And I think that Raven could be a very, very big deal in this upcoming fight. Fantasy sees an opportunity and moves in. A lot of Clem's tanks were on siege, only getting a shot just now. Second shot, and then most of them did not really get a third shot as Fantasy's tanks sieged up and just absolutely took them down. Nothing really to be done there for Clem. Fantasy, I think, made sure to focus fire on Clem's tanks to make sure they're all gone, while his tanks, meanwhile, actively survive. It's a small difference. You know, that army size was not that different between the two. The positioning certainly was. Fantasy saw the opportunity and took it, but also I'm going to guess some micro went into that decision as Clem was not quite ready to take the fight. Hadn't decided how he was going to take that fight. Which is a little late to that siege up. He tries to take advantage of what he thinks Fantasy doesn't see. After all, he had the Viking advantage, but the scan was perfectly timed from Fantasy. A lot of the tanks take a lot of damage. Clem does hold the line, stops the Planetary from being attacked, had to lose 12 SCVs to do so, but they both are on 4 bases and quite a lot of SCVs, so I don't consider that the worst thing in the world. I'm far more concerned about the lack of Marines here from Clem. He's trying to pump out from a lot of production facilities right now, and he's also trying to keep that air advantage. It's the one thing he really has going for him. He can get the better army, even if Fantasy can replace the army faster, if he can hold on. But that is the question. Can he hold on here? Fantasy rallying, not so much anymore, it looks like. Rallying can be difficult and dangerous in TVT, but he does have some reinforcements. There we go here. He does have some Ravens. He does have some Vikings, but he's going to go ahead and retreat. Not going to overstay his welcome as the Viking count gets a little dangerous, as the Liberator comes forward. He's not going to try and combat that, even though he would actually win, technically, with the 2 Ravens adding in their missiles. He's going to instead reposition just out of range of that sensor tower. Now going into range, he can't really reposition too much, Thunderbird being that nice defensive map. Eventually, you got to get back into the tower range. Eventually, you got to attack into this tank line, but a little bit of repositioning perhaps opens up that 3rd base. Not really. Oh, lordy. Uh-oh. Vikings a little too overeager. Saw the medevacs and wanted to take off. Now we're trying to get those Ravens, and the Ravens are alive. One dies, but only after setting off the interference matrix plus the anti-armor missile. The Liberator should have been getting some shots. Oh, one was interference matrix. There we go. They should have been getting a few more shots, taking out that front line of the tanks, but good use of the Ravens for Fantasy. Clem's, unfortunately, never really did very much, did it? And Clem now sees an opportunity. He's got a big old concave on top of Fantasy's army, but it's because Fantasy's army is actually attacking into his 3rd right now, and this concave was not as good as Clem was hoping for. So much of his army was in tanks that were actually back here, not attacking the army on the front. So the Marines die, his SCVs die, his command center is probably going to go down here, and Clem simply has to tap out. He was just too pressured after a rough start as well. Never was able to gain any footing back. No drops were done. No harassment was really done. Those Hellions did not do as much as they should have, could have, and they can snowball. TVT is also a matchup about comebacks, so if you do manage to get a couple drops out there, you do manage to surprise them with the Viking Liberator domination, then, you know, it can change, but not this game. Fantasy gets the early start, gets ahead early, and then just runs with it to a 14-minute victory. But it's only game 1. We'll see what happens the rest of the best of 5 going into game number 2. All right, game number 2 on Disco Bloodbath. I believe these were done, the maps that are, that is done with vetoes. I'm pretty sure. That's how a lot of tournaments that are invitationals or are long running, like they were qualifier, then they were bracket type thing. That's usually how they do maps. I know I do a lot of Elite League casting on this channel. You know, the replay pack that you can get from that, as well as sometimes on my actual stream. I cover for Maynard when he's you know, busy. I'll be doing it next week. It was like I did last week and before that. But when it comes to Elite League, that's unique. It's not just unique because of the map pool limitations, that's pretty much unique only to Lima League, but it's also that it's a sign-up tournament, which when it comes to open tournaments, some that you just like put on at X time, X day, maybe every week, maybe not, that's usually when you just go ahead and go, just like choose the first map. Because usually when it comes to that much potential chaos, shall we say, it runs a lot smoother when you force the first map and then just have the loser choose, which is generally what happens there. But if it's a longer running tournament, if it's, you know, just a thing where you're only taking care of 4, maybe up to 8 players instead of potentially 32, then certainly vetoes are the fairest way to go. We have them for WCS and for GSL. You have them here, I believe, for Ward East tournaments as well. Don't know exact veto process, so if you're gonna ask me that, I don't know. Look Wikipedia, guys. But it's usually like A, you know, flip a coin, choose A. In this case, there might have been a higher seed. I'm not sure who dropped down to the lower bracket first, but yeah. Just an overview in case you guys aren't familiar with the live tournament structure. I know a lot of people actually just watch StarCraft on YouTube. It feels very 2010 to me. It's where I got my start watching StarCraft on YouTube, typing like, how do I get better at StarCraft? And then finding, not even really Husky, which is what everyone usually says, but I watched StarCraft, as well as Force Strategy Gaming, who's now just a general YouTuber, and probably other people I don't remember, but it is still a thing. If you guys are actually the type to only watch on YouTube, let me know. I'm very interested in that. Perhaps you do love to watch live tournaments, you just don't seem to ever find them on when you're available to watch. I don't know, let me know. It's always cool to see who's watching what's, you know, get the demographics in there and all that. And, yeah. Just starting to get some nostalgia about those days. Anyways, last game, Fantasy got a greedy opener. That worked out really well for him. And some of you might have looked at that and been like, well, hell, like, I mean, what is Clem supposed to do against that? Well, to be clear, Clem wasn't just going for 1-1-1 as in a typical, what we usually see. Well, he did go up to the starport, which is what he's doing here after a factory expand. He went for a Hellion drop. Now, a Hellion drop is about as harassment-oriented as you can get. Even a Banshee can sometimes come along with a push, but Hellion's not so much. I don't think any Hellbat pushes really exist anymore in this matchup. So when you go for harassment only against someone who's actually supercharging their economy, that's usually what the supercharger macro person is actually okay with dealing with, because even if it does go a little catastrophic and it gets 12 SCVs instead of just 4, well, I had this much faster third CC, so I don't actually, like, it's okay. What they're really scared of are the pushes, not something that's based around harassment, but something that actually, while 9 out of 10 times might be a poke, just a little like, hey, what you doing there? And then they, you know, both do the same thing, so they just bounce off each other. If your opponent is going for a fast third CC, that's when you're using damage. So I'm talking about, like, yeah, tank drop, which is what Clem's doing alongside some Hellions. I'm talking about the tank push with the Ravens that we see a lot of the time as well. Hell, even a Cyclone push early on, which doesn't really happen anymore. Some of those lines would have been something a bit better at tackling it. So just throwing it out there for anyone's like, why doesn't everyone do a third CC? It's actually quite dangerous, or at least supposed to be. Now, Fantasy figures out that he's about to be attacked and pulls the SCVs, which is the best case scenario, because right now his problem with dealing with something like this is his mobility. That is to say, if his army is entirely in one place and he misreads where Clem's dropping, then he is in trouble. So he chooses the safe option and kind of guards both his bases, and doesn't have to worry about the SCV losses, just to worry about lost time. And eventually his instant reinforcements, his defender's advantage, will actually kick in and he'll be able to take care of this. Now, Clem should know this is not something meant to do a lot of damage, so he's actually severely overstaying his welcome. His medevac goes down, his tank goes down, and the rest of his units will go down despite any attempts to use some fancy grenade throw. It doesn't actually matter, and Fantasy gets a complete cleanup. Clem, despite having a tank in that push, guys, it's not actually something that's meant to last very long. I know some people out there probably still struggling against those 1-base tank drops or hell even 2-base tank drops, saying this is absolutely BS, isn't this the best thing in the world? You clean it up sooner rather than later, it's usually pretty good. You use your reinforcements to your advantage, it's usually pretty good. You use your number of units with an SEV pool, it's usually a pretty good defense. And right there, Fantasy just had to wait for a couple more units. And then also the advantage of the tank being taken down due to the lost vision. And there you go. Easy peasy cleanup. Fantasy really showing his mastery of TVT right now, and Clem trying to throw out some different things, not working out. His Banshee was caught midway, but actually manages to find a lack of a second scan, and the Raven not quite popped out, so actually grabs 7 SCVs. That's about what you want from a Banshee that you committed with Cloak. A second Banshee is on the way, it looks like, over to the right side. But key thing here, if you go for Banshees, you're not going for your own Ravens, you're not going for your own Vikings. And that's when someone who is doing Vikings or Ravens, or preferably both, actually has a great advantage. Banshees are a little out of the meta for a reason. They're just not as good as the Raven openers, which have come to dominate TVT for the most part. And their ability to do damage is decreased because of the Ravens. Their also ability to defend has decreased because Ravens. They're pretty good. They both scout and take away units from an army fight. Isn't that great? So we have a Viking and a Raven, both singles here. No buddying, no buddy system, but still good enough to overtake Clem, who's trying to go into a lot of Marine production following that little attack even before his 3rd CC was started, which would be fantastic for taking on someone who is just doing this push with the 3rd CC already in mind, except that his production is out camped. Disco Bloodbath has this really nasty area over here that Clem did not consider. He probably thought by the time this would be under attack, he should have been able to intercept the push and take care of it. So all that production that was faster than Fantasy now does no longer matter. He has to rebuild the production. And luckily for him, he does not lose Stim, but had it been any closer, he potentially could have lost Stim. If you lose the barracks, you lose Stim. Before I say he hasn't lost Stim, okay? Don't lose Stim. Don't lose Stim. Oh god. Stim might die. The SCVs they're freaking out, man. They don't know what to do. They're trapping each other in here. Stim still has like 10 seconds to go. Just save the barracks, save the Stim, save the world. Oh god. Oh no. Oh jeez. Oh god. 1 second. Okay, he's gonna let it die now. Not that he really wants to let it die, but there goes his 3rd barracks. Double drop in the main base is what his eyes were set on, but he's not gonna find much success. Just enough Marines to actually tackle this, I believe. Maybe not. The Marines unload from Clem. With that Sim already done and even a +1 upgrade, so they will be able to take out a couple SCVs, but Clem has lost his production, he's lost his drop, and he's about to lose his natural, and more production is being set up there as well, so that drop certainly was not worth it, but he had no other choice. He really didn't have a way to break out of this. The Raven cells have been used. There you go. Interference base. It's on the high ground, and Clem, all his SCVs have been pulled to try and take care of this, but without the help of the tanks on the high ground, it's not going to be enough. 30 SCVs down, killed. Down about 25, while Fantasy has his 3rd CC done, turning into an orbital. He is a little behind on those upgrades, and he has just lost a good portion of his army, but finds a Banshee, easy peasy, no cloak. Clem unable to do so before it dies. That could have been a little something. Now it's nothing. But Clem's gonna try and use his army advantage. He knows he has. He knows he pretty much cleaned Fantasy out right there, even at the loss of all of his SCVs, so he's got to have a temporary army advantage, and he would be right about that. Even some Vikings taking away from the overall army of Fantasy, which is half that of Clem, but tanks are good at defending at a lower army supply, guys. That's why TVT has a lot of comebacks, but Fantasy a little slow on that production, only has 2 tanks ready to go. His Vikings do lose a lot of mining time for Clem, but they're not back at home again defending, and this is potentially where Clem's going to make the comeback maneuver. 3rd CC is still not going to be used here, whereas Clem, well, it's not orbital, but he can make SCVs from it, and it is mining. Might start to get a little bit of a lead there, depending on how long he can keep Fantasy contained, but it is just a contained. Clem can't actually break through those tanks on the high ground. A single Raven would have made a huge difference here, or even just lifting with the medevacs over to the right side probably would have been the absolutely best move to take out natural mining, as well as stopping a 3rd CC with basically anything, but he actually moves forward with the tanks. It's a huge mistake. Fantasy's tanks just taking out Clem's only advantage. His army pretty much goes bye-bye, and while Fantasy also loses 2 tanks, it's not really comparable. Also, Clem, despite having that faster Stim, never remembered to grab combat shields, which should have been in his advantage for the last minute or so. But now Fantasy has his combat shields, and his army is just straight up better, despite being still a tiny bit smaller. Combat shields is a huge, huge, huge thing to have when you're talking about these high DPS units. Also helps them survive another tank blast. And what is Bio TVT all about? High DPS Marines and tank blasts. So, you know, TLDR, combat shield's really good. He's finally on his way to getting it, but Fantasy is starting his harassment, forcing Clem to come back with his entire army. There wasn't much more to be done. I guess you could argue we should have been able to sell out that third to see a little bit more, but it was time to pull back. We're talking about Disco Bloodbath, the largest map in the map pool, so reinforcements are not that fast, and pulling back your army is also not that fast. But he does manage to grab Fantasy's drop. Fantasy not quite moving away quite enough. Clem finally using this third CC as an orbital and mining, but miss mining. Okay, he notices. All right, then. His combat shields are finishing up again, and he's about to take the pressure to Fantasy side of the map once more. But if he's desperate, he must be rallying. And if you're rallying, drops get really, really, really good. That's actually why in TVT you don't see a lot of rally pushes, because a single drop when you only have 3 Marines at home that have just put out from your barracks is devastating. The Fantasy is all at home. Besides drop anyways. He has a very well-placed Tensor Tower to see the little nook here, as well as his own third. It's all covered with vision. Clem's gonna have a Liberator in his natural and a Medevac drop in his main with no protection against it. Clem actually thinks he sees an opportunity, but I don't know if that's actually there. 3 tanks, but going through the choke do take out a lot of Clem's Marines, even though they go down. And maybe Clem was right. He takes out the tanks. He can now advance his position. He's only at 4 tanks, but that's just enough. Fantasy not setting up any other type of flank here, is being contained a little bit, but still mining off of his third CC. The main is about to be dropped. As I said, nothing here to defend against it as Clem has been rallying in desperation. Liberator looks like it was taken down. Don't see that anywhere. That's the good news. The bad news is lots of damage in that main base. But speaking of main bases, Clem actually picked up and went to the main. Unfortunately, looks like the missile turret took out his medevacs and took away a lot of the power of his drop. The tanks were also positioned to try and help out the Marines, but they weren't really in proximity to those tanks. So Fantasy loses 26 SCVs. Clem loses 11, and he also loses the majority of his army. Now 30 army supply down. He has stalled out Fantasy's third base mining, taking it a closer battle, perhaps than it really should have after all the damage he took earlier on. But Clem down 40, 50 army supply, still not cleaning up this drop in his main base. Is pretty much dead. He'd require quite the epic comeback to make it here in game number 2. It's a best of 5, so, you know, he gets another shot. But Fantasy getting a lot of early leads in these games, whether it's build-wise or just push-wise. Clem making some actually very notable mistakes. You know, pushing up the tanks against those 2 tanks was not the right call. He wouldn't, you know, he couldn't have known that this was open. You know, there's so many things going on. That is the type of stuff that you would see the world's best TDTers do, is look for those advantages. And instead, I think he's getting a little bit rushed, a little bit too pressured, not keeping quite the cool head, and is making some simple TVT mistakes. When it comes to professional TVT, you are supposed to know that tank range to a T and never move your tanks in position. Even if you think they don't have a scan, or you have Viking control, it's really dangerous. Only done when you're a little bit desperate or you're a little bit risky. And Clem can be both. He can be risky, he's also desperate. An accidental Marauder even made here. The tank on the high ground is actually really a big help, but not going to last forever. More ICDs go down. Clem had his little tiny drop doing something, but not enough. Another double drop headed towards the main base of Fantasy. Trying to turn this into a bit of a base trade, but I don't believe Clem has enough tanks to actually make it work. These Marines would simply drop on this army or just get a concave on it. From the top side, that choke's not small enough for the 2 tanks to hold against all those Marines. They are taken out here. Double drop on top of the tank at the third base. So Fantasy will lose control of that once again. Some SCV is also going to go down. Actually, the third CC is going to go down here. Clem's third CC might actually survive. No, I don't think so. I don't see any tanks in that natural. No tanks in the natural, which something that Fantasy also sees means that there's actually not going to be that much of a hold in the natural. Back here, 2 tanks on the high ground, and Fantasy does hold his own second base despite losing his third. But Clem, how is he going to hold at home? He's not going to hold at home. What's going to happen? GG, he realizes he cannot win in that base trade. Maybe it would have gone on longer had he had more tanks, but there was just not enough minerals of gas, specifically minerals, I think. And perhaps also a couple mistakes macro-wise. A very it was a close game in terms of the potential comebacks. Like, if a couple things go differently and suddenly we are back to like, okay, this is even, because TVT can absolutely do that. But every time Clem might have had an opportunity, he either mismicroed himself, chose the wrong path here, choose your own adventure, he flipped to the back of the book when he's actually just dead, or Fantasy was on top of it. You know, he's just too good. That's what we'd expect from those Korean Terrans, right? It's not over yet, though. Game 3 coming up. Acropolis is going to be the battlefield for game number 3. Is this going to be the final game, or can Clem make a comeback? He's been showing some problems here and there, while Fantasy has been mostly doing everything right in TVT. Nothing really to say that was glaringly bad. I guess not having a second scan for that Banshee and do more damage than it should have, but overall very solid. Where Clem, not just a few mistakes here and there with the tank positioning and all that, but also just getting the worst trades in the early game. But choosing some risky things that aren't working, and that's what happens. So maybe he'll just go back to a very defensive setup, just, you know, plain old 2 Ravens, fast with 3rd CC, but not, you know, as fast as Fantasy. I'm not sure. Kind of said it last game, right? With the Super Saiyan that's a little uncontrolled. Like, he has the power to be the fastest, the strongest, the best, but it's not controlled correctly. One of those things that made the Thermal such a promising young Terran years ago was that he looked a lot like Clem, and you were like, okay, I see it. I see the power surges, right? But then it was still, you know, not being controlled. There was some bad decision making. There was some too risky decisions being made. Decision making in general seems to be kind of that, you know, point of critique for a lot of young players as they get into more best of 3s. Now at this point, Clem's actually very experienced with tournaments, but still, it probably is, I would say, the thing I would point out. But then Thermal actually learned to control it, and while he is still a riskier player, he still sometimes does not have the most level mindset. We've seen him tap out of a couple games after losing 2 games in a row that maybe, you know, we're supposed to tap out of. As really quite, like, matured. I think that's the right word, as a player. But what starts, especially for the Terrans, it feels like Terrans, the multitasking race, the one that's got to have drops everywhere, as well as producing back home, setting everything up. No bias, guys. That's actually what it is. We see a lot of the Terrans who are coming up actually be like this. And it's funny that you can see it across all regions as well. A lot of the Korean Terrans are so fast and so unique in their play style, but they either are made or broken. They either make it with that, like Mario, I suppose, or they're broken by it, can't actually quite make it into that top 32, which is very difficult to do in Korea. Like, I don't know, Journey comes to mind, who you probably don't know about, but kind of checked off all those marks I was just discussing, and then was unable to really push past the already settled in pro gamers. But anyways, game number 3, the chance to make it all good again, to bring it back, bring momentum back to you. This is the lower bracket of the tournament, so this was really all the marbles are on the line. What actually happens, though? I don't know. 3rd CC has been delayed here. Clem had a bait Marine, it looked like, that was on purpose. And then sent his Reaper over the right side. So that was kind of cool. He would go for a factory expand. So his would be later if his didn't block the CC. It should still be later. Even with that tiny interruption, Fantasy not playing any super greedy game here, did go for his own Hellions, and in fact is going for Reactor Hellions, which can help handle this type of pressure really well, as opposed to just getting Marines, which can be microed against. So if you have a lot of problems with those factory expanders in TVT, the ones that just send Reapers and Hellions at you, a Reactor factory opening might be something you could look into to help out, or just get a bunker. Bunkers really help. Anyways. Nothing too dangerous to speak of. Just a Liberator follow-up. It's quite common. Besides, he wants to block the Reapers out since the Reapers of Fantasy are still alive. Well, Reaper is still alive. The Hellions are a little scary, but Clem also started to make some Hellions of his own. Not Reactor, just one at a time, and then obviously had the ones that he was attacking with, so he actually has a similar number. Shouldn't be afraid of losing his SCVs in the natural. Raven coming out here for Fantasy, as well as a Cyclone follow-up, is pretty much the safest thing you can do. Helps against drops, helps against Banshees, helps against Liberators, helps against everything. But oh my god, Clem moves his Hellions. He was supposed to be totally safe against this, but he was like, oh, I guess they're not coming. Oh no, they were on their way. They just took a detour first. So 8 SCVs go down. And unfortunately for Clem, he's not going to be able to find the same return damage despite having those same units. His one Hellion's already very weak, but by the time he gets across the map, even with these speedy units, Fantasy will already have, 6, 8 Marines, a Cyclone, and even a Raven with some auto turret action can take out those Hellions. It's not going to be comparable. Clem's going to have to try, though. I mean, the Hellions are useless. The Hellions do not get better here. So you got to try, but I'm pretty much... I think he already knows it's not going to work out, but he's got to try. Fantasy knows this is the only thing that Clem really has to throw at him, so he's going to prepare for the Hellions. While there is a Liberator being sieged up on the right side, it's something that Fantasy can deal with. His tank pops out really nicely timed here. Liberator might be able to escape. It does come back again later, but that was the one and only chance the Hellions had to do something, and now that the tank is out, no more chances there. Maybe if you bother getting a medevac, but you don't really want to unless that was your plan from the get-go. You want to build Vikings right now, and I mean, if your Hellions live till you start making medevacs for Marines, then well, then you can do a drop. But that's a long ways away. We have Clem unable to produce everything he wants because of those 8 SCVs dying. By the way, we see some later supply depots, we see some missed ICVs, and it's actually because he can't afford that. Plus all this production right here. Very tight build if you aren't even attacked. Try and do this build, which I actually think is a good build. What we see here is a very common setup of production. You'll feel just how tight that build is. Losing 8 SCVs is not going to help that. Whereas Fantasy is just like producing SCVs, producing upgrades, production units, and even fitting that 3rd CC in there. That is one of the key differences of their plans, but it's also just the key difference of losing 8 SCVs in early game. When you're already a bit behind in the orbital, by the way. So, we have Clem deciding to go for a 2-base follow-up. Now, eventually we'll add a 3rd. You don't get a lot of 2-base all-ins. You don't even really get a lot of 3-base all-ins anymore. And that is an all-in with the intention to not expand again, because all-ins with Terrans get very odd. We pull our SCVs, and then we just mule anyways, and the game goes on, and you're like, what? Huh? Okay. But yeah, with the intention not to expand again, we don't see that too often. But for now, Clem is hoping to get that earlier advantage on the Marine production and really just corral Fantasy, hopefully around 2 bases, but at least stop him from moving out once he gets that 3rd. He's going to start with this push. Stim is faster for Fantasy, but he should have less Marines when all their upgrades are said and done. But now it is about Vikings and tanks. Classic little setup here. Tanks getting a little too far forward. Ravens going for the Interference Matrix and the anti-armor missile. The Interference Matrix on the Vikings, however. So Fantasy's tanks actually go down. I thought he was going to Interference Matrix Clem's tanks. Was that the right call from Fantasy? He doesn't win the Viking War. He doesn't... I mean, I guess technically he wins the ground war, but only because he can reinforce faster. Well, it's still more power to Fantasy. He takes out a Viking here. He just moves away from the Liberators there. And his Raven actually survived, although with only 14 hit points. Oh, he wants that tank. Dangerous, though. Very dangerous. Clem expands on location. I do love that move. And as I said, he might have a few more Marines because of those earlier barracks, but he will be eventually still slower on economy if he can't further stall this 3rd CC from Fantasy, which is done and has been producing SCVs for a while. Fantasy actually up 15 workers, but 15 workers that aren't actually usable right now. Not really. The saturation of a base, oh my god, oh jeez. It actually improves up to like 22 SC or something like that. 16 out of 16 was just the perfect amount. But yeah, 32 out of 16, okay. That's not helping you. So he really needs a 3rd CC down. He's going to get it, as Clem is still building his, not even an orbital quite yet. There will be an economic difference for sure. We're also going to have an upgrade difference. 1-1 on the way for Fantasy, but neither one of them starting combat shields yet. Uh-oh. Whoever starts combat shields first could have a great advantage. Certainly, Clem can make up for that lack of +1 armor if he had combat shields. Seeing it though. Works a little more on attacking and defending. Center Tower is trying to come up here. And it will finish, it looks like, but that Liberator is a super big threat. Clem's going to have his reinforcements cut off. Oh no, a big old tank getting taken down. Nice pick off for Fantasy. It does alert Clem to the potential surrounds. He's going to try and kind of cut it off at the path, but it's going to be difficult to do. He's got to worry about basically like a 220 surround here going down, and there's nothing much he can do about that, especially since his army gets interference matrix. His best bet is to get out of there with whatever units he can, and that only means the Vikings. His Vikings will win the air war if it's only the air. The Marines trying to help here, corralling the Vikings into that little area, and actually he will not win the Viking war. Just barely not, but he will not. Clem gets entirely cleaned up. His army supply plummets. Down 20 compared to Fantasy, down an upgrade. Still neither one of them starting combat shields, by the way. Despite Clem's temporary advantage of Marines. Yeah, it's actually not there, never mind. It won't actually matter if Fantasy... Ooh, we're taking combat shields first. Okay, they both realize it at the same time. Never mind. But still. But still. Now, with combat shields equally timed, it comes down to that +1 armor. If it's just a pure Marine battle, Fantasy's absolutely going to win. But it's never just pure Marines, is it? Perhaps Clem can get a better tank position. He does have control of the map, I would say, right now. A little bit. He's got more units out on the map anyways. But it is Fantasy going for a double drop. But there's Clem's Marine. Very well placed, very well timed to see that. He should have enough time, plenty of time moving to the main base, but he's got to make sure not to open himself up to a potential attack on the third. That's where he's probably just looking at the center tower. You know, he's moving to the main. He realizes, okay, I shouldn't leave my third completely open. And he's also looking for any red dots at that third. It's what you should be doing right now. His second Marine scouts at the unload happened premature to the main, so he could maybe even move those units, but it's dicey. And he could just immediately pick up and go in there, and it wouldn't be 5 seconds to do that. Fantasy has another attack to the south, and Clem does not really have a ton of tanks to spread around quite yet. Tank production seems to be one of those things that he sacrificed as he tried to fit in everything he usually would, but at lower SCVs. Second factory is now on the way. Already done here for Fantasy. He was up 2 tanks now. Almost 3. Also working his way to more Vikings. The drop here is caught. Medevac might have died as well. The Fantasy's quadruple drop, I guess now, as it joins forces. Can't quite take on the Marines plus the tanks. +1 armor is going to finish here, and +2 attack already started for Clem means that he's catching up on those upgrades, despite being a full upgrade behind, so that's pretty good, as long as he remembers to start the armor immediately. There we go. That's much better than anticipated. Much closer game, but still, Clem down 10 workers, 10 army supply. Army supply is not really such a big deal. Even up till 30 army supply, tanks can just change the tide of battle so quickly. But as they reach towards a 4th base, or hell, even a 5th base here for Fantasy, that's when 10 SCVs might be a big deal. But they actually got to get the bases down first. Fantasy already maxed out, but no blows done to each other means that they're starting to accrue a lot of bank, or at least Fantasy is. She's going to slap down 2 orbitals, 3 orbitals, potentially. Well, 2 orbitals and an expansion probably. As well as take that planetary fortress. Clem, not sieged, is caught a little bit out in the open by an overpowering amount of Marines. No upgrade difference yet, but the tanks are taken out of equation by the interference matrix. However, there's more Marines here for Clem as he takes on the Marines of Fantasy. Fantasy getting a little bit overconfident there. Solid opportunity with the tanks not sieged, but actually that was a lot of Marines. And they were equal upgrades. So he's forced to back away, but just some Marine losses really for both parties. It's not too bad. Clem needs that 4th base down location mining as he still struggles to get enough minerals. 2-2 will finish faster for Fantasy, and both of them out in the map like this. Oh my god, this is a huge surround. Clem actually going to go for it, but I think it might be too much as my cat gets on the table. Oh, cat. Oh god, let's just rewind that. Let's just rewind that. Cat interference, not fair. Not fair. Clem's going to go for the big old surround, but he shows his hand by scanning like that. Fantasy's already on top of the idea. He has so many tanks, while Clem does manage to jump on a few of the ones that were on the front side. So many of the tanks teach up on the back side, forced his Marines away, but his tanks getting a couple good blasts as well. Turns a little bit even, but Fantasy still coming out just the tiniest bit ahead, and then has that better production to work it out. Actually, a bit more than a tiny bit ahead. He actually just came out ahead right there. Plain and simple. Perhaps doesn't look that way as his army's very small, but it's because he has so much army back here. That's why I was bamboozled. He actually just won that plain and simple. 50 supply, and yeah, better reinforcements. Yeah, definitely. And now he has better upgrades. Although not for very long. +2 armor is going to finish here in like 15, 20 seconds. And I don't see Fantasy taking a fight through the choke against siege tanks, upgrade or no. He's gonna try and reposition. Center towers for Clem, not seeing the double drop on the main base, and no missile turrets either. This is going to be a big problem for Clem to handle. 2 medevacs is that perfect amount to just not really be able to tackle reinforcements. 1 medevac drop, maybe. 2, not so much. The tanks do pop out in the nick of time. Looks like one coming from the natural too, and that will just barely be enough to at least push it back. Supply depots have gone down, SCVs have gone down, and Clem's attention has been diverted, although no losses on the front side. That's actually not a lot of tanks if there was potential, concave, but with the layout of Acropolis, it's not really possible. So Clem doing a very dangerous, but perhaps very, very good thing here by going for a mass doom drop, but just of Marines. He won't have any staying power in the main base, and Clem actually just running into a bunch of Marines from Fantasy. Fantasy had figured out where the Marines went. They weren't in the main base to defend. They weren't at the tanks to defend those, so where else could they be? Going for a good old doom drop, and Fantasy was on top of it. All the medevacs pretty much going to go down here. These last 2, not even with any units. Clem, once again, plummeting in that supply. His tanks are now pretty much barren. No protection here. Not a lot of Marines. No Vikings. They could be dropped on or simply surrounded very easily. Clem trying to reinforce the middle of the map. He just finds all of Fantasy's army. And where are his tanks? They're on the front lines. He's got a planetary and a single tank to help defend, but there's like 7 tanks about to attack it, and Clem is not going to win this base trade either as he gets his 3rd CC to lift. Fantasy does not really care. He knows he's won the game here. Good read, good anticipation. You don't see Marines with an army. Where else are they going to be except dropping you, right? That's DVT right there. Looks like Fantasy tried to run into the tanks and failed, but he's eventually going to win as he dropped into the main base as well. Not the best drop possible, as Clem kind of saw it coming, but still enough to have 3 tanks and a handful of Marines to dominate the production. Clem is forced to tap out, and he does unfortunately get 0-3'd by our Korean Terran Fantasy. Young versus old. France versus Korea. The old Korean guy takes the victory. Of course, Fantasy only comparatively old compared to Clem's age. But cool little TVT right there. You did get to see some stylistic differences, but not necessarily of Europe versus Korea. I would say more so Clem versus Fantasy. Fantasy does kind of stick to more of the stock standard for TVT, and just lately has been more standard, which has seemed to net him some more victories in those major tournaments as well as the online ones, like this one. So again, if you guys would like to watch the rest of the tournament, see how Fantasy did, or you want to go find the replays, or the VODs in general, whatever you want to do, whatever. The world's your oysters, guys. Go to Wardy TV, his Twitch, his YouTube, his Twitter, his Discord. He does give his replays out to subscribers, so that's another fantastic place to get replays if you're looking to get into your own casting or just an analyzing, or just to say that you have them. Maybe there's some replay collectors out there. I don't know. So make sure to check that out. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed the cast, and make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel where I do plenty of casts and build order tutorials, and check out other RTSs. And I will see you guys on my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/ZombieGrub live, Monday through Friday, and occasionally some weekends for some viewer games and all that. I'll always have my schedule on my Twitch page if you want to check it out. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.